Imagine this moment. You walk into a room where people are talking, laughing, and sharing stories. Conversations are flowing easily. Some people are confidently introducing themselves, while others seem completely relaxed, as if speaking to strangers is the most natural thing in the world. But when it is your turn to speak, something strange happens. Your mind suddenly goes blank. Your heart beats faster. Words that normally come easily disappear. You want to say something, but instead you stay silent. Later, when you leave the room, your mind keeps replaying the moment again and again. Why didn't I say something? Why do I always freeze when I try to talk to new people? If you have ever experienced this feeling, you are not alone. Many intelligent and capable people struggle with the same problem. They have ideas, opinions, and stories worth sharing, yet the moment they face a conversation, anxiety takes control. But here is the good news. The ability to talk to anyone is not a special talent that only a few people are born with. It is a skill. And like any skill, it can be learned and improved. Once you understand the simple principles behind confident communication, conversations begin to feel easier, more natural, and even enjoyable. In this guide, we will explore 8 powerful steps that can help you talk to anyone without freezing. Step 1. Stop trying to be perfect. One of the biggest reasons people freeze in conversations is the pressure to say the perfect thing. Many people walk into a conversation with an invisible rule inside their mind: every sentence must sound intelligent, interesting, or impressive. They feel as if every word they say is being judged. Because of this pressure, the brain becomes overly cautious. Instead of speaking naturally, the mind begins to analyze every possible word before it comes out. It asks questions like, is this sentence good enough? Or will they think this sounds stupid? While this mental analysis is happening, the natural rhythm of conversation slows down. Words that normally come easily begin to feel heavy and difficult to say. Sometimes the mind becomes so focused on avoiding mistakes that it produces the worst possible result: complete silence. The person wants to speak, but the pressure to sound perfect stops the words before they even begin. The truth is that real conversations are rarely perfect. If you listen carefully to everyday discussions, you will notice that people pause in the middle of sentences, repeat the same idea twice, forget certain words, or laugh at their own small mistakes. Conversations are messy, spontaneous, and sometimes unpredictable. Yet these imperfections are exactly what make communication feel natural and human. Imagine 2 people having a conversation where every sentence sounds like a rehearsed speech. It would feel stiff and unnatural. Real connection does not come from perfect sentences. It comes from honest and relaxed communication. When people allow themselves to speak naturally, even with small mistakes, the conversation becomes more comfortable for everyone involved. Another important thing to understand is that most people are not carefully analyzing your words the way you imagine. They are not sitting there judging every sentence you say. In reality, most people are simply enjoying the interaction or thinking about what they want to say next. The pressure you feel inside your mind is often much stronger than any judgment that actually exists in the conversation. Once you realize this, it becomes easier to let go of the need to sound perfect. Instead of trying to impress others with brilliant sentences, focus on something much simpler: expressing your thoughts honestly. If an idea comes to your mind, share it. If you find something interesting, say it. If you are curious about something, ask about it. Conversations are not performances where you must prove your intelligence or creativity. They are shared moments between 2 people exchanging thoughts, experiences, and emotions. When you shift your goal from sounding perfect to connecting honestly, the pressure begins to disappear. When you give yourself permission to speak imperfectly, something powerful happens. Your mind relaxes. The fear of making mistakes becomes smaller. Words begin to appear more naturally, and the conversation starts to flow without effort. Over time, you may even notice that the moments you once worried about, small pauses, forgotten words, or awkward laughs, often become the moments that make conversations feel warm and genuine. By letting go of perfection, you create space for real communication to happen, and speaking to others becomes far easier than you ever expected. Step 2. Shift your focus away from yourself. Another powerful reason people freeze in conversations is that their attention becomes completely focused on themselves. In the middle of a conversation, their mind begins asking uncomfortable questions. Do I sound awkward? Am I talking too much? Do they think I'm boring? What if I say something wrong? These thoughts may seem small, but they create a strong mental pressure. Instead of listening and responding naturally, the brain becomes busy monitoring every action, every word, and every reaction from the other person. This self-monitoring turns the conversation into something that feels like a performance. And when the brain feels like it is being judged during a performance, it often becomes tense and cautious. That tension is what causes the familiar feeling of freezing. The interesting truth, however, is that most people are not paying nearly as much attention to you as you think. In fact, they are usually thinking about themselves. The person standing in front of you might also be wondering if they sound interesting, if they are speaking clearly, or if you like them. In many conversations, both people are quietly worried about how they appear, even though neither person is actually judging the other as harshly as they imagine. When you understand this simple reality, it becomes easier to release the pressure you place on yourself. One of the most effective ways to break the freezing habit is to shift your focus away from yourself and toward the other person. Instead of wondering how you look or sound, become curious about who they are. Curiosity changes the entire direction of your attention. When you are genuinely interested in someone else's experiences, ideas, or opinions, your brain naturally moves away from self-criticism and toward exploration. You begin to listen more carefully. You begin to ask thoughtful questions. And most importantly, you begin to feel less anxious because the conversation is no longer centered on you. Curiosity is powerful because it creates momentum in a conversation. When someone feels that you are truly interested in what they are saying, they often become more open and enthusiastic. They start sharing stories, explaining their thoughts, and adding details to their experiences. This naturally gives you more things to respond to. Instead of struggling to invent topics, you simply follow the direction of the conversation. The other person's words become the path that guides the discussion forward. Shifting your focus outward also helps you become a better listener. Many people think that good conversationalists are those who speak the most, but the opposite is often true. The most engaging communicators are usually the best listeners. They pay attention to details. They notice emotions. They respond to what the other person is actually saying rather than preparing their next sentence in advance. This kind of listening makes conversations feel meaningful rather than mechanical. When you stop worrying about how you appear and start paying attention to the person in front of you, something remarkable happens. The pressure inside your mind begins to fade. Conversations feel less like a test and more like a shared experience. Words come more easily because you are reacting naturally instead of performing carefully. By simply shifting your focus away from yourself and toward genuine curiosity about others, you remove one of the biggest causes of conversational freezing and open the door to more relaxed and authentic communication. Step 3. Master the art of simple questions. One of the easiest and most powerful ways to keep a conversation flowing is by learning how to ask simple questions. Many people freeze in conversations because they believe they must always say something interesting, funny, or intelligent. They feel pressure to come up with clever statements that will impress others. But in reality, great conversations rarely depend on brilliant speeches. Instead, they grow from curiosity. And curiosity is usually expressed through questions. Simple questions act like doors. When you ask a good question, you open a path for the other person to share their thoughts, experiences, and stories. Most people enjoy talking about things that matter to them, especially when they feel that someone is genuinely interested in listening. Because of this, questions make conversations easier for both sides. You do not need to carry the entire conversation alone. Instead, you invite the other person to participate and contribute. The most helpful type of question in a conversation is an open-ended question. These are questions that cannot be answered with just yes or no. Instead, they encourage the other person to explain, describe, or tell a story. For example, instead of asking, "Do you like your job?" you might ask, "What do you enjoy most about your job?" The first question ends quickly, but the second one invites a longer and more meaningful response. Questions can also help you discover interesting details about the other person's life. You might ask how they became interested in their work, what hobbies they enjoy, or what experiences have shaped their journey. Each answer they give becomes a new opportunity to continue the conversation. If they mention something interesting, perhaps a hobby, a recent trip, or a new project, you can simply ask another question about that topic. In this way, the conversation develops naturally, without needing complicated effort. Another advantage of asking questions is that it removes the pressure from your mind. Instead of constantly worrying about what you should say next, you allow the conversation to unfold through curiosity. When the other person speaks, you listen carefully and respond to what they share. Their answers become the guide for the next part of the discussion. However, it is important that your questions feel genuine. If questions sound forced or mechanical, the conversation may feel unnatural. True curiosity makes a difference. When you ask because you truly want to understand someone, your tone and body language naturally express interest. In the end, mastering simple questions is not about memorizing a list of topics. It is about developing a habit of curiosity. When you approach conversations with a desire to learn about others, questions appear naturally. And once questions begin opening those conversational doors, you will notice that talking to people becomes much easier and far less intimidating. Step 4. Use your environment as a conversation starter. Another reason people freeze during conversations is that they believe they must create a topic from nothing. When the mind feels responsible for inventing something clever or interesting, it can quickly become overwhelmed. You might stand there thinking, "What should I talk about?" Or "What topic will make this conversation interesting?" While your mind is searching for the perfect idea, the moment to speak passes. The silence grows longer, and the pressure becomes stronger. Fortunately, there is a very simple solution to this problem. Use your environment as a conversation starter. Your surroundings are full of natural conversation opportunities. Everything around you can become a topic if you simply notice it and mention it. The location, the event, the activity, or even something small happening nearby can open the door to a conversation. For example, if you are attending an event, you might say something like, "This is my first time here. Have you been to this event before?" If you are sitting in a cafe, you could comment on the atmosphere, the music, or the food. Even a simple observation like "This place is much busier than I expected today" can begin a relaxed exchange. These kinds of comments work well because they create a shared moment between you and the other person. Instead of feeling like two strangers trying to force a conversation, you become two people noticing the same environment together. That shared experience immediately gives the conversation a natural starting point. Once the other person responds, the interaction begins to develop its own flow. Another advantage of using your surroundings is that it feels spontaneous and genuine. You are not delivering a rehearsed line or repeating a memorized introduction. Instead, you are simply reacting to what is happening around you. This makes the conversation feel more relaxed and authentic. It is also helpful to remember that the first topic of conversation does not need to be deep or exciting. The purpose of the first sentence is simply to start the interaction. Once the conversation begins, it will often move naturally toward other topics. A small observation about the environment might eventually lead to discussing personal experiences, interests, or ideas. By learning to notice your surroundings and turning those observations into simple comments, you remove the pressure of inventing topics. Conversations begin to feel easier because you realize that you are never starting from nothing. The world around you is always offering small opportunities to begin speaking, and those small moments can grow into meaningful conversations. Step 5. Learn to embrace small pauses. One of the most uncomfortable moments in a conversation for many people is silence. When a conversation suddenly pauses, even for a few seconds, the mind often reacts with panic. Many people immediately think something has gone wrong. They worry that the other person is bored, that the conversation is failing, or that they must quickly say something to fix the situation. This fear of silence is one of the main reasons people freeze during conversations. When the brain believes that every second must be filled with words, the pressure becomes overwhelming. However, the truth is that small pauses are a completely normal and healthy part of communication. In fact, almost every natural conversation contains moments of silence. When people are thinking about what to say next, they often pause for a short moment. These pauses allow the brain to process information and organize thoughts. Without them, conversations would feel rushed and unnatural. Imagine a discussion where both people speak continuously without ever stopping. It would feel exhausting and chaotic. Silence gives conversations rhythm, just like pauses in music give meaning to the notes. Another important thing to understand is that silence often feels longer in your mind than it actually is. A pause that feels like 10 seconds may only be 2 or 3 seconds in reality. Because your brain becomes anxious during those moments, time appears to stretch. But the other person usually does not notice the pause in the same dramatic way that you do. Learning to embrace small pauses can make conversations far more comfortable. When a brief silence appears, instead of panicking, take a calm breath and relax. Give both yourself and the other person a moment to think. Often, the other person will continue speaking after a short pause, especially if they are reflecting on something meaningful. If they do not continue, you can gently guide the conversation forward by asking another question or sharing a related thought. For example, you might say something like, "That's interesting. How did that experience affect you?" Or "What happened after that?" These kinds of responses naturally restart the conversation without creating pressure. When you stop viewing silence as a problem and start seeing it as a natural part of communication, your anxiety begins to fade. Conversations become calmer and more relaxed because you are no longer racing to fill every moment with words. By accepting small pauses instead of fearing them, you allow conversations to breathe. And this makes your interactions feel more natural and confident. Step 6. Improve your body language. Many people believe that conversation is only about words, but in reality, a large part of communication happens without speaking at all. Your body language, how you stand, where you look, how you move, sends powerful signals to the people around you. Before you even say your first sentence, others are already forming an impression based on your posture, facial expression, and eye contact. At the same time, your body language also influences how confident you feel inside. Because of this, improving your body language can significantly reduce the chances of freezing during conversations. When people feel nervous, their bodies often show it immediately. Their shoulders become tight, their arms cross over their chest, and their eyes move downward or away from others. These small actions may seem harmless, but they create two problems. First, they make you appear closed or uncomfortable to the person you are speaking with. Second, they send signals to your own brain that something is wrong. When your body looks tense and defensive, your mind begins to feel more anxious, which increases the chances of freezing. The good news is that small changes in body language can quickly create a different effect. Start by relaxing your posture. Keep your shoulders open instead of tight, and allow your arms to rest naturally at your sides or on a table. Face the person you are speaking with and maintain gentle eye contact. Eye contact does not mean staring intensely, it simply means looking at the person occasionally while they speak and while you respond. This shows that you are present and interested in the conversation. A small, natural smile can also make a big difference. Smiling sends a signal of friendliness and warmth, which helps the other person feel comfortable around you. When people feel comfortable, they are more likely to engage in the conversation and respond positively. Interestingly, these physical adjustments do not only influence how others see you, they also change how you feel inside. Psychologists often explain that the body and mind are closely connected. When your body adopts a relaxed and open posture, your brain begins to interpret the situation as safe and manageable. This reduces anxiety and helps your thoughts flow more smoothly. By paying attention to your body language, you create a supportive environment for conversation. Your presence becomes calmer, your mind becomes clearer, and the interaction feels more natural for both you and the person you are speaking with. Over time, these small physical habits can make a powerful difference in your ability to communicate confidently without freezing. Step 7. Practice small conversations every day. One of the most effective ways to overcome the fear of freezing in conversations is through regular practice. Many people believe that communication skills only matter in big situations, important meetings, job interviews, presentations, or networking events. Because of this belief, they wait for these major moments before trying to improve their speaking ability. But by the time those moments arrive, the pressure is already high, and anxiety makes the situation even more difficult. The truth is that confident communication is not built during big events. It is built through many small interactions that happen in everyday life. Every day, you encounter numerous opportunities to speak with people. These moments may seem simple or unimportant, but they are actually perfect opportunities to practice conversation. Greeting a neighbor in the morning, thanking a cashier at a store, asking a colleague about their day, or making a small comment to someone standing next to you in a line. These interactions may last only a few seconds, but they gradually train your brain to feel comfortable speaking with others. Over time, these small conversations reduce the fear of talking to strangers because your mind becomes familiar with the experience. Think of communication like a muscle in your body. If you rarely use a muscle, it becomes weak and stiff. But when you exercise it regularly, it becomes stronger and more flexible. Conversation works the same way. The more you speak with different people, the more natural it begins to feel. Your brain learns that conversations are safe and manageable, which slowly reduces the anxiety that causes freezing. Another benefit of practicing small conversations is that it helps you develop awareness. You begin to notice what types of questions create engaging responses, what topics make people enthusiastic, and how body language influences the mood of an interaction. With each conversation, you gain experience and confidence. It is important to remember that these small conversations do not need to be long or complicated. Even a short exchange can make a difference. The goal is not to impress people or create deep discussions every time you speak. The goal is simply to become comfortable starting and participating in conversations. As you continue practicing daily interactions, something interesting begins to happen. Situations that once felt intimidating start to feel ordinary. The nervousness becomes smaller, and the idea of speaking with new people no longer feels overwhelming. Through consistent practice, your communication skills grow naturally, and the habit of freezing slowly fades away. Step 8. Remember that confidence comes after action. One of the most common misunderstandings about communication is the belief that confidence must come before action. Many people wait until they feel completely confident before starting a conversation. They tell themselves, "I'll talk when I feel more comfortable," or "I'll speak when I'm more confident." The problem with this mindset is that confidence rarely appears on its own. If you keep waiting for it, you may end up waiting forever. In reality, confidence is not something that magically arrives before you act. It is something that grows as a result of action. Think about any skill you have learned in life. Whether it was riding a bicycle, learning to swim, or speaking in front of a group, you probably did not feel confident the first time you tried it. At the beginning, there was uncertainty and nervousness. But each time you practiced, the experience became a little easier. Slowly, the fear decreased, and your confidence increased. Conversation follows the same pattern. The first few times you start talking to someone new, it may feel uncomfortable. Your voice might feel slightly tense, and your thoughts may move more slowly. But once you begin speaking, something interesting usually happens. The mind adapts to the situation, and the conversation starts to flow more naturally. The hardest moment in any conversation is often the very beginning. Saying the first word, the first greeting, or the first question requires a small amount of courage. However, once that first sentence is spoken, the barrier begins to disappear. The other person responds, the interaction starts moving, and your mind relaxes. What felt difficult only moments ago begins to feel manageable. This is why many confident communicators follow a simple rule: start before you feel ready. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect level of confidence, they simply take a small step forward. They say hello. They ask a simple question. They make a small comment about the situation around them. These small actions create momentum, and that momentum helps the conversation grow. Each time you take that small step, you gain experience. Each experience teaches your brain that conversations are not as frightening as they once seemed. Gradually, your comfort level increases, and confidence becomes a natural result of your repeated actions. In the end, confidence is not the starting point of communication, it is the reward that comes after you begin. By choosing to act even when you feel slightly nervous, you train yourself to move past the fear of freezing and step into the flow of real conversation. Conclusion. In conclusion, learning how to talk to anyone without freezing is not about becoming the most charismatic, loud, or perfect speaker in the room. It is about understanding simple human psychology and applying small but powerful habits in real conversations. Many people struggle with conversation because they put too much pressure on themselves. They try to sound perfect, worry too much about judgment, and overthink every word before speaking. But real communication is not about performance, it is about connection. When you stop chasing perfection and start focusing on expressing your thoughts honestly, conversations become more natural and less stressful. Another important lesson is that conversation is not a solo activity. It is a shared experience between two people. When you shift your focus from yourself to the other person, curiosity naturally replaces anxiety. Asking simple questions, listening carefully, and responding to what the other person says helps conversations flow smoothly. Using your environment as inspiration for conversation topics also reduces pressure because you never have to start from zero. Small observations can easily open the door to meaningful discussions. Learning to accept silence, improving body language, and practicing small daily conversations are equally important steps in building confidence. Communication is like building a skill through repetition. The more you practice, the easier it becomes. Over time, your brain learns that speaking with others is safe, natural, and even enjoyable. Most importantly, remember that confidence does not come before action. Confidence is built through action. Every time you say hello, ask a question, or share a thought, you are training yourself to become a better communicator. In the end, talking to anyone without freezing is not about eliminating fear completely. It is about moving forward despite the fear. When you take small steps consistently, you will slowly transform from someone who freezes in conversations into someone who speaks with calm confidence and natural ease.